And that is what makes this matchup intriguing. Not because Jake Paul is the better boxer. Not because Joshua has declined. But because boxing, at its core, is unpredictable. A young, confident disruptor. A seasoned, powerful former champion. One chasing legacy. One chasing validation. This is not just a fight. This is a collision of generations, industries, and fan bases, a spectacle that forces everyone to ask, what happens when the impossible becomes unavoidable? And on fight night, under the lights, the world will finally get its answer. But then Jeffries showed the numbers: 43 amateur fights for Joshua. Olympic gold. 28 professional bouts, world titles, and 25 knockouts. Jake Paul's lone loss was to Tommy Fury, and comparing Tommy Fury to Anthony Joshua was night and day. Veteran Chisora took a harsher stance. He blasted the idea of the WBC giving the winner a ranking, calling it a complete disgrace to the sport. He said real fighters earn their positions, not influencers with viral moments. Meanwhile, analysts reminded fans not to overreact to Joshua's past knockout losses. Losing to a heavyweight like Daniel Dubois does not mean he would struggle with Jake Paul. Joshua still has elite skills, elite power, and years of experience that cannot be replicated quickly. But another voice warned Joshua, do not underestimate Jake Paul. Jake knows how to build hype, control narratives, and lure opponents into comfort. If Joshua enters the fight relaxed, even for a moment, Paul could shock the world. Still, even the most optimistic observers couldn't deny the gulf in pedigree. Critics called the matchup a mismatch. But Budarian pushed back, insisting Jake Paul was built for big moments, and that Joshua's pressure could make the fight dangerous for both men. Then came the voice of Alexander Usyk, a man who has beaten Joshua twice. His comparison was blunt, almost brutal. Anthony Joshua is a Rolls-Royce. Jake Paul is a Fiat. He said Paul was stepping into danger far beyond hype or influence. Still, he jokingly added that he would pray for Jake Paul, because he wanted to fight him next. Other experts brought different angles. Olympian Tony Jeffries reminded fans that Jake Paul has resources most fighters never have: elite trainers, world-class conditioning teams, access to the best sparring on earth. He's young. He's athletic. And youth, Jeffries insisted, is one of boxing's greatest advantages. Joshua also revealed something unexpected. Normally he is the one calling fighters out. This time, Jake Paul called him. That alone, in Joshua's eyes, showed a level of belief that deserved respect. Still, no amount of respect could hide the overwhelming reality: the size difference was enormous. Jake Paul, solid in his own division, looked like a completely different species standing next to Joshua. 6'1" against 6'6". Around 220 pounds against 250 pounds of sculpted heavyweight power. A genuine David versus Goliath image, except this Goliath was an Olympic champion with one-punch knockout ability. Promoter Nikisa Budarian later revealed that the fight wasn't even supposed to happen this soon. Their plan was for 2026. But Paul demanded it now. Negotiations were compressed. The timeline accelerated. The spectacle became unavoidable. As weight discussions surfaced, analysts noted that Jake Paul would likely come in around 225 to 230 pounds, while Joshua would be capped at 245 pounds. He explained that his decisions were no longer about fantasy contracts or imagined super fights. It was about negotiation, worth, and making the fights that the world demanded. And whether fans accepted it or not, the Jake Paul matchup had become a global conversation. Kellerman pushed further, pointing out what everyone was thinking. This was one of the strangest heavyweight matchups ever made. A seasoned former world champion versus a social media star stepping into the deepest waters imaginable. But Joshua didn't flinch. He gave Jake Paul credit, not for skill, not for experience, but for something less visible: he brings new eyes to boxing. Joshua acknowledged that Paul had thrown himself into the sport with no amateur career, no traditional background, and no roadmap. But what he did have was enthusiasm, confidence, and a willingness to challenge himself against men who had been fighting their whole lives. Anthony Joshua vs. Jake Paul, the fight no one expected. For years, the heavyweight division lived in the shadow of one simple truth: Anthony Joshua wasn't just a champion, he was the image of what a world champion should look like. A man who filled stadiums, moved nations, and carried the economic weight of boxing on his shoulders. So when whispers began that Joshua would face Jake Paul, the reaction was universal disbelief. A former unified heavyweight king, against an internet entertainer turned boxer? The fight sounded like a fantasy, until it became reality. Joshua sat down with Max Kellerman ahead of the showdown, carrying the same calm confidence that once captivated 100,000 fans inside Wembley. But this time, Kellerman wasn't interested in titles, belts, or past glory. He wanted to get inside Joshua's mind. Why this fight? Why now? Joshua didn't dodge the question. He spoke like a man who understood both his value and the spectacle surrounding him.